Welcome to the lab here at Peptide Alchemist. Let's clear something up right now. Peptides aren't being cooked in bathtubs. They're not being mixed in garages. And this isn't an episode from Breaking Bad, all right? In today's peptide landscape, fear tends to sell better than facts. And that's exactly why so much misinformation exists. It sells. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the truth, whether you like it or not, about where peptides actually come from. So let's dive in here to where peptides come from with the Peptide Alchemist. If you want to understand peptide safety, you first have to understand peptide manufacturing. How are they made exactly? Do you understand that process? So right now in the United States, there's only a handful, maybe roughly five, maybe four to five manufacturers with the technical capability, the clean room infrastructure, and the regulatory clearance to synthesize peptides at that kind of scale. There just aren't large enough manufacturers in the United States right now. These aren't supplement companies, right? These are not your wellness clinics and brands. These 4 to 5 manufacturers, they're pharmaceutical contract manufacturers, all right? Their production lines are reserved for FDA-approved drugs, clinical trial compounds, and proprietary pharmaceutical pipelines. They're not selling to the mom and pop shops. They're not providing those peptides to them. So because of that, their peptides are extremely expensive. Their capacity is fully contracted, and their raw materials are locked into pharmaceutical supply chains. Again, they're not providing the peptides to your online suppliers that you see. They are not supplying the consumer peptide market. They're not supplying clinics. They're not supplying the biohackers. They're not supplying the wellness brands. They physically just can't do it. And economically, they just wouldn't do it. Doesn't make any sense for them. They are locked in to the pharmaceutical side, and for good reason. So let's talk about where peptides really come from, right? So once you remove the pharmaceutical grade production from the equation, the reality becomes very clear. If we know that peptides are only going to pharmaceutical grade research labs and pharmacies, it becomes clearer. Over 90% of non-pharmaceutical peptides originate overseas. It's just the truth. I hate to say it, I hate to break it to y'all, but it's the truth. Most commonly, these come from China, and occasionally they come from Europe, India, or Canada. And here's the uncomfortable truth for critics. That includes small peptide companies. That includes mid-sized brands. And yes, it does include many of the biggest names in the peptide industry. Most of them, if not all of them, are getting the peptides and the raw materials from the same place, right? Most of these companies are sourcing the same international manufacturers. Why? Because it makes business sense, right? We'll talk about it more. It makes business sense. The real difference, though, isn't where peptides come from, right? The real difference is the testing standards, the transparency, the storage capability, the handling, the quality control, and the synthesis of these peptides. That's where it starts to differ. So let's debunk some things, right? Let's debunk the whole bathroom myth, okay? Let's just go ahead and address that myth head on. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, peptides, they're not being cooked in a bathroom. They aren't being synthesized in a microwave. Actual peptide synthesis requires solid phase peptide synthesis machines. These machines often cost six figures, if not more. The equipment is expensive. The synthesis process requires clean room environments, specialized reagents, restricted solvents, advanced purification like HPLC, and trained chemists to actually do this. Now, could someone learn to do it that's not a chemist? Absolutely. But they still need all those other things to do it, right? This isn't methamphetamine. This isn't you go to the store and you buy ephedra and you buy this and you buy that and you cook it up. This is industrial biochemistry, guys, okay? So the idea that peptides are being mixed together in kitchens or garages, it's just simply not grounded in reality. Sounds good, makes for good fear marketing, but it's just not grounded in reality. It's not true, all right? So then, let's talk about what the gray market is, what it means, right? Now, some of you have probably heard of that gray market, right? And a lot of people out there, influencers, like to use the word gray market as a scare tactic. But let's be honest here. The gray market doesn't mean unsafe, not at all. What the gray market means is that the peptides are not FDA approved drugs. They're not being sold under pharmaceutical claims. The gray market, within the gray market, they have removed the FDA oversight and any FDA guarantees, right? Those are removed. That's it. That's what the gray market means. It doesn't mean they're unsafe. It doesn't mean they're much different. It just means they have removed those things, right? The gray market peptides exist in a regulatory gap, if you will. Not a biological gap, in a regulatory gap. They are chemically identical to the pharmaceutical counterparts, often synthesized in the same facility. And they are subject to varying levels of third-party testing, right? Some of these overseas companies test them with a third party themselves. They send their own products off. Sometimes the customer will do so, right? So the lack of FDA involvement doesn't automatically make a peptide dangerous. Not at all. There's a lot of things on our market that are not FDA approved that aren't dangerous that we take on a daily basis. What it means is that the end user must take responsibility for the sourcing, the testing, the verification, handling, and storage. This is for research. So you have to do all those things in your research, right? This is not for human consumption. This is not a medication. This is for research. So you have to do all those things. And that's what the gray market provides. You have to take on all of those things on your own. So let's talk about GMP versus reality, right? So pharmaceutical grade peptides come with a GMP certification, FDA batch tracking numbers, legal accountability, and, as we've already said, extremely high cost. Gray market peptides, they may follow GMP-like processes overseas, and they often undergo third-party purity testing, like I said, either from the company or customer has sent off their batch. But what they do not is they do not carry any FDA enforcement or any kind of pharmaceutical liability. Those laws don't apply to them over there. That doesn't make them fake. It doesn't make them dirty. It doesn't even make them unsafe. What it does make them is unregulated, and that must be understood. Many clinicians, researchers, and biohackers knowingly accept this trade-off because pharmaceutical because pharmaceutical access is very limited to them. If they do have access to it, it's very cost prohibitive. And research doesn't require FDA labeling. This is for research, where you're allowed to do experiments. You're inside a lab, right? So if we understand now what the gray market is, we understand why the fear mongering is out there. Why does that fear exist? So why make it all scary and doom and gloom, right? Simple. It's very simple. It gets attention. It gets your attention. It pushes you in a certain direction. Clickbait narratives are easier than explaining supply chain. It's easier than explaining chemistry and regulatory nuances. It's far more profitable to say all gray market peptides are dangerous than to admit that the system is just complex and that all gray market peptides are not dangerous. Ironically, many of the loudest critics out there actually use peptides themselves, and these users often source the very same manufacturers from overseas, and they just rebrand under different narratives. You see, guys, it's a small world right now in the peptide world. So they may source their raw material somewhere, bring it back, reconstitute it, call it American made. They may label it here, call it American made. But here's the truth, and stripped of any emotion, all right? There are only a few U.S. manufacturers capable of true peptide synthesis. A handful, maybe 4 or 5. But these manufacturers serve pharmaceuticals, not consumers. Most peptides, I don't care if it's the mom and pop shop or it's one of those big names that you've seen online, most peptides originate overseas. We've already stated that the gray market does not mean unsafe. It just means unregulated. And peptides aren't being made in bathrooms or garages. It's just not possible with the amount of equipment and supplies that they need. So safety, because safety is important, safety comes down to education, sourcing, testing, and responsibility. Not fear, not making people fearful. Find someone that is knowledgeable. Pick their brains. See what they know. Because peptides are very powerful tools. And like any tool, misuse creates risk. But pretending that the FDA approved automatically means safe, well, or that the gray market automatically means dangerous, that doesn't help anyone. And it just clouds the information that's out there. The truth is, FDA approval doesn't mean it works, doesn't mean it's safe, and gray market doesn't mean that it's bad. So always try to optimize your biology, redefine your strength, and follow us here at Peptide Alchemist for more information like this. Make sure you hit the like, follow, and subscribe button so that you can get updates. And also remember, this content is for educational and informational purposes only. Peptides discussed are not FDA approved. We've already said that. They're not for human use unless otherwise stated. And this is not medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional and comply with all local laws and regulations. I'm not here to give medical advice. I'm just here to give information. So, thank you for joining us here at the lab. I just wanted to put this out there of where peptides actually come from. There is a lot of chatter out there right now about what's going on legally here in the States, of what's Congress is about to pass. And there's reasons for it. And we will talk about those reasons in another episode. But first, I wanted to tell you about where peptides actually come from. So, come back and see us in the lab next time. All of you enjoy a new year. Make sure you hit your goals. Like, subscribe, and follow. We'll see you next time.